Hi and welcome to Ground Pole Circuits number 1. This circuit includes 5 stations that are spaced evenly around the school. I've planned the stations so that each works a slightly different part of the horse's body and that an easier station follows a more complex one. Pole station number 1. This station has 3 phases. The first phase simply asks the horse to walk through the corner that the poles create. As they walk through the corner, the idea is that they walk as close to the inside poles as possible. This encourages them to almost step over the corner and increases their inside limb flexion. Phase 2 increases the difficulty because the horse is then asked to step inside the corner with the inside limbs as they move around the poles. So the inside fore and the inside hind step inside the corner. Due to the acuteness of the turn, I would only ask the horse to step through this either 2 to 3 times in one sequence before moving on to the next pole station. The third phase becomes more difficult because the horse is asked to step over both sets of poles as they move around the corner. As you can see, they step over the first 2, then the inside of the corner on the outside, and then over the 2 again to complete the turn. So 1, 2, inside the corner, and then 1, 2 again to complete the turn. Again, I would only ask the horse to repeat this 2 to 3 times in one sequence before moving on to the next station, and would also make sure they were completely comfortable with phases 1 and 2 first. So pole station number 2 is a little bit more simple. It just has 3 half-raised poles at a walk stride distance for the horse to walk over. I've put this exercise after pole station number 1 because it's a little easier and a little less for the horse to think about. So it's a little bit of downtime after having the more complex exercise at number 1. Again, in one sequence of the circuit, I would ask the horse to cross these 3 poles 3 times before moving on to the next station. Pole station number 3 is a bit of a trick because it's actually cones rather than poles. The cones are placed on approximately a 15-metre circle and are about 4 strides apart, 4 to 5 strides apart. However, if you've got a bigger horse, you might need to make that a little larger, or a smaller pony, you'll obviously make that a little smaller. The idea is that the horse walks in and out of each cone, and as they do so, they bring the inside hind to the midline and hopefully flex their spine and the whole of their body really around the cone. And because they're going in and out one direction then the other, they're doing that alternately, so hopefully getting them to flex down their spine one way and then the other. For phase 2 of the exercise, I get Elsa to just walk around the outside of the cones, just on the circle. And then after she's done a couple of circuits on the outside, I bring her into the inside and ask her to walk a smaller circle around the inside of the cones. Each time I go around the pole circuit, I go in a different direction. And that's more important for some of the exercises compared to others, but this is one of the exercises that it is important for because obviously in this direction I am moving around on the right rein, and then when I change direction and come around the circuit in the other direction, I will be working Elsa on the left rein. So phase 3 of station number 3 is very similar to stage 2. However, I just ask Elsa to trot around the cones, around the outside of the cones. This is the only bit of trot in this pole circuit and of course doesn't need to be included if for whatever reason you're not working with your horse at trot at present. Pole station 4 is another one of the more complex pole stations. It's made up of 3 poles. There's a narrow gap between the 2 poles that are in a straight line, and then the 3rd pole is parallel to the 2 poles but a walk distance away. I also have my poles raised, which increases the difficulty. As you can see, I started by walking her through the poles and then asking her to back up for a few strides before carrying on. After that, I come round to pass through the gap and then over the 1 single pole. And here I'm turning right to go to cross the 2nd pole at the widest point, so it's a single pole again, before turning her a little more acutely right so that she can cross over the 2 poles together, and again even more acutely right to cross over the next 2 poles together before going to the widest point of the top pole, so it's just 1 pole again on its own. Bit of a difficult one to describe, so probably easier just to watch. Now what I did to finish is I brought her around so that she could then cross over the 2 poles diagonally. So we've got a little bit of lateral movement there, and then brought her around again to attempt that from the other direction. However, I hadn't set her up as well that time, so didn't quite get as much lateral movement. Now I've also included a video of this pole station in the other direction, so with the turns to the left. Each time I did have to come in front of Elsa to back her up, so this is something that we need to practice, because when I was at the side of her, she preferred to move away from me and move a little bit diagonally, hence knocking a pole down. So that's something for us to practice and something to just be aware of when you start this exercise. The other thing that I experimented between was turning her towards me and turning her away from me. So on both of the videos here, I turn her away from me. And I'm not sure whether that made it a little bit more difficult as well, because I think sometimes she's used to following me. And as I was on the opposite side of the way that we were going, she kind of had to make the way herself, if that makes sense. And she did question that a little bit to begin with. So I think that's something as well that we could do with practicing, making sure that she's comfortable, not only being led from both sides, but also from being led towards me and away from me. Pole station 5 is another very simple pole station that actually doesn't include any poles again. It's 4 cones, again about 4 strides apart. Maybe these ones are a little closer together, just in a straight line, and doing exactly the same as we did around the circle to provide an easy finish. So that was circuit number 1, 5 different stations to work different parts of the horse's body.